Hi, class. In this lecture, we're just going to get a general introduction to culture, why we study culture, how we go about studying culture, what is culture, things of that nature. So, to start out, we have our just our module overview there. So basically, throughout class, we're just going to be studying culture in all its different contexts. We're going to look at how culture affects us as individuals, how it affects us as collective groups of people, how it infects, how it affects our interactions with others, and then of course we're going to think about globalization because we know in the past, oh, we'll just say 500 years ever since we had cultural contact and both sides of the world came together, we've had conflict when it comes to culture too. So we want to think about, how history, colonialism, globalization, how those affect culture too. There's a lot of bad things there. There's some good things there. And then when it comes to studying culture, we want to make sure that we look at those norms, those values that constitute our cultures. And in saying culture, we have to understand that culture is just not this like large it's not this large group of people. Basically culture is it's all the things that we do that make us human. And so it defines groups of people, but there are also subcultures within that larger culture. So like it's saying here in our overview, something like your workplace, that is a type of culture. Your family is a type of culture. Social, specific social groups, social organization, those are all types of cultures. And the reason is because they all involve people interacting with each other and doing so in an agreed upon way. So those are kind of those cultural, social norms and values that we exemplify and we follow when we are working within the social environment, right, guys? So it's important to study culture because we want to have that cultural literacy. So, what does literacy? Usually, when we say literacy, we think of, being able to read, you know. When you're literate, you can read, you know stuff, you can research stuff, you can figure out facts from non-facts, get and further delve into truth. So that's the same thing with cultural literacy. So cultural literacy is about getting those facts, doing that research, even interacting, participating with different cultures so that you build those social skills that allow us to engage with each other in compassionate, respectful, and understanding ways. And that really helps us as far as our communication goes, right? Because as human beings, we rely a lot on our ability to speak words and to make sure that other people understand what we are saying. And, we don't always get along in those situations, and that's okay too. Conflict's kind of part of life. The key there is how we react to it, and always that kind of calm place of compassion, respect, and understanding, because that person that you're fighting with, they're a person just like you. And even though you guys don't agree on what you're talking about, they, as much as you feel like you want to be listened to and respected, so too does the other party involved there. So that's a big part of studying culture, is just that idea of, learning about ourselves, learning about others, and then figuring out, how we take all this cultural diversity and all of our individual diversity and, kind of balance those out so that we can find better ways to engage each other. We can find better ways to handle conflict when it arises, and we can find better ways to manage our stress. And I hate saying that as in better ways, because that's kind of a ranking. It's like, well, what exactly does better mean? And I think of it as it's more kind of those more positive and productive ways that help us all learn and grow and, move forward to reach our higher selves, our more authentic selves, or like a psychologist Abraham Maslow said, reach our self-actualized selves. And so, by studying culture, those are some of the forces at play there. And it, like I said, it just all comes down to this idea of how do we take our diversity and learn to work with it in new ways that move us all forward in those, positive and productive uh, means. And diversity is a good thing. The reason that we are here, the reason we have this planet and life is because we have different things, so our differences, our individual gifts, they're all special, and they all contribute somehow to that greater good, right? So, in our first module this week, we're just going to be, like I said, we're going to be defining culture, kind of discussing culture, exploring this idea of cultural studies, and then we're going to be looking at some of those primary sources that contribute to the development of world culture. So basically, that's just talking about, those those basic ideas of what constitutes culture. How do we, apply that universally? Who are some of those people that were, pioneers in the field of um, generating that interest in our cultural diversity, and at the same time, helping to preserve that? And then, like I said, this idea of cultural literacy. Why should we, be concerned with other cultures? Why should we learn and study other cultures? And it's because, it does benefit us individually and as groups and societies. And we see that with history because, we don't want more war in the world. That doesn't get us anywhere. We don't want atomic bombs, nuclear bombs being dropped on the world. That doesn't get us anywhere. That kind of keeps us stuck. And, the point of life is learning and growing, and that is evolutionary dynamic process, because as much as things seem to stay the same in our lives, there's always a force of change that is involved there. All right, so as I was just saying, cultures are dynamic, even though, we have things like traditions and maybe belief systems that are passed on from generation to generation. But then at the same time, we have this dynamicism. We have these maybe new twists to the old things. The first thing that comes to mind is movies, right? We really like to take old movies and redo them as something new, right? So, that's that dynamicism of culture, or maybe even the way that we celebrate our traditions, maybe something like a Christmas tradition. Maybe you have something specific that you do with your family. Maybe you have something that you do that's reflective of the whole culture. Maybe you've taken your Christmas and, you've put your own little spin on it, and you guys do your own, do it in your own way. All that is a part of how culture influences us as individuals, our personalities, and then how it affects that larger world and society that we live in. And, all of it's just about helping us understand what it means to be human. So, when we're really looking at studying culture and cultural studies, kind of the main academic scientific field is anthropology. And, it's simply definition of anthropology is the study of humans, the study of humans and culture, right? And then when it comes to all of the social science fields, humanities, liberal arts, some way or another, all of those fields are looking at people and, in many ways studying culture in some way. So, those main ones that when we think of, oh, well, what academic fields study humans, sociology, anthropology, archaeology, philosophy, psychology, but even political science, criminal justice, literature, art history, all of those involve looking at what it means to be human. So basically, that's what we're going to spend the next 9 weeks doing is looking at what it means to be human from that cultural kind of anthropological lens. And so, as I've already mentioned, we're going to be looking at how the Western culture has influenced the rest of the world, and that's a globalization would be a big part of that. But we're also going to see how Eastern culture has been very influential on Western culture too. Things like psychology and philosophy. We tend to think of those more in the Western lenses, but the beginning of those fields actually comes from Eastern cultures. There's a lot to Taoism, Buddhism, like those types of ideologies and philosophies. Really, they're just kind of life philosophies, not really belief systems, as in religions per se. But more, you know, uh, ways of teaching us how to live life and do that happily and successfully. And so a key to that, so my point to that is that with those Eastern philosophies, we see this idea of what does it mean to be human and how we be human. And then, so that's really the foundation for psychology. And like I said, philosophy, because philosophy is kind of the foundation for psychology there. And in that aspect, then how we see how we kind of move up the chart and we get all these other academic fields that look at what it means to be human. Because, when it comes to culture and being human, it's very multifarious, which means we've got a lot of it and we've got many different ways to go about doing it and viewing it and seeing it. And so, it's hard to take that and put it all into one class or one field. So, that's why we've got all these different branches that kind of focus on a different aspect of being human. All right, so basically that's just our little intro there for our first week of class and kind of what class is about. So now let's dig into actually getting a definition and a general overview of cultural and cultural studies. And in doing that, we're also going to talk a little bit about anthropology and archaeology. So, all right, guys, let's begin. Follow page. Okay, so when you look at this slide, what do we see? Well, I know it sounds like a rhetorical question, right? It's obviously a map. It's a one-dimensional representation of our world, right? So we see the ocean. So it's our planet stretched out so that we pretty much see all of it on this slide, right? We see all the continents, we see all the oceans, and then the thing that really sticks out to me is that I see a diversity, a plethora of colors. And that really interests me because I'm like, well, why do I see all these different colors on this map? And then, it's because those different colors represents different cultures, it represents different groups of people, different ideas, different belief systems, different ways of viewing the world and being human. And I just think that that's very fascinating and very intriguing to see that diversity. And for me personally, it makes me want to know more about it. I remember being a little kid and having, the old globes. And kids still use those nowadays, but having one of those old globes, and spinning it, and you put your finger and end up on a country, and then you go get out your little Encyclopedia Britannica books. You guys remember when they'd go door to door, and you'd have to get the and you could order the series of the encyclopedias, and they'd have like the science ones too. And then I'd get that out and, go and look up what that culture was all about and, just fascinating stuff. As, you know, as ugly as we are as humans at times, and, social media likes to kind of throw that in our face sometimes, make us just think that we're all very different and we're all so divided and we're never going to get along. And, it really appeals to our egoic, hedonistic sides, right? There are many beautiful things about, the world we live in and the cultural diversity and the different types of people that we surround ourselves with. And I would think with most of you guys being in the military that you get that idea because, I have not personally served in the military, but my dad was a chaplain's assistant in the Army for, oh gosh, something like 22 years. He started out trying to do like the where you jump out of the helicopters, and he had some bad experience. He had a grenade blow up in his hand, and my dad was he had that weird Irish luck. It didn't hurt him, but he was kind of like, no, don't want to do that. So he went to be a chaplain's assistant, right? So with my older sisters and I, we spent the majority of our childhood traveling around the United States. Germany was the only place we've lived overseas, but we lived in Germany, and we were constantly surrounded by people who didn't look like us, people who didn't talk like us, people of different cultures, and we somehow. You make that work in the military. Everybody gets along. You have this shared sense of culture because, there we go. The military is a subculture. And so I guess my point to that is that just to go back and reiterate that, it's really as ugly as we can be as human beings. We're still really fascinating creatures, and it's really super interesting to learn about our diversity and all the different ways that we are humans and all the different ways that we exemplify that through culture. So, when it comes to studying culture, as I've said, anthropology is the main field that deals with that. And a lot of times when we think about anthropology, I was going to say it's usually in a present tense type of fashion, but, it's kind of getting to a point to where anthropology is a little bit like archaeology. It kind of focuses more on prehistory because a lot, like, when I was in my bachelor's program back in the late 90s, early 2000, some of these cultures that we talked about then, they don't really exist anymore, because globalization has grown so much in the past 20 or so years, and so when we're looking at anthropology, we are looking at different cultures, and a big part of the way that we do anthropology, I say we as in the Western world, it is us in the Western world looking at these other cultures, and a lot of these other cultures that anthropology has examined since its inception would be many that we consider third world countries. That's kind of an idea that came about during the Cold War era because, society and the world was very divided. It was like you were capitalistic, you were communistic, or you were one of these lower peasant third world countries, pretty much, right? And so, as we became more industrialized and we're colonizing more places, we start to lose some of that diversity because, think about it. People don't like not to be told that they're wrong. People don't like other people telling them what to do. How would you feel if someone came into your home and, kicked your dog, burned your house down, told you you're wrong, your wife's wrong, your hair's wrong, your face is wrong, the way you dress is wrong, your kid's wrong, what you believe is wrong, your music's wrong. It's like wrong, wrong, wrong. And we're here to tell you what's right. And if you don't like what we're telling you, we'll just kill you. And, that's how it goes. That was kind of a lot of early colonialism was like that. And, once again, that's kind of that ugly side, that shadow side, as Karl Marx would say, that we have as human beings. And so it's important that we learn from those attitudes and behaviors in the past and the way different cultures viewed each other because, it just goes back to what I've already said is that if we want to move forward in positive and productive ways, we've got to create more compassion, respect, and understanding in our world. And, we do start we have to start with ourselves, meaning that we have to give ourselves more compassion, respect, and understanding because none of us are perfect and we all make mistakes. And when we can learn to be more kind with ourselves about that, it makes it easier than when we go and deal with other people because they're going through the same exact thing. Even if what's coming out of their mouth sounds totally different from you, they have the same human struggles as you, right, guys? And so, let's see. All right, so I'm not going to read everything on the slides to you guys. You guys can read all of that. If there's anything that you would like me to expound upon, if I don't, just get in touch with me and I'll be more than happy to explain more. The last thing I want to hit on here is just that last point there. So, yeah, when it comes to talking about culture, when it comes to studying what it means to be human, I mean, the sky is the limit. We cover everything from, the most hedonistic, sadistic of human behaviors, to the most altruistic of behavior. So, the full spectrum there: gender, sexuality, sex practices, sickness, health, how we view life and death. How do we view, the relationship of us to the outer world, as in the natural world, how we relate to, animals, how we relate to each other, social constructs, spiritual religion, anything you can think of that makes us human is covered and talked about in anthropology. Even, the most taboo of subject, things like incest, things like cannibalism, things like infanticide, we cover all of it. All right, so when it comes to describing culture, we say that culture is the collective acknowledgement of social members based on symbols and beliefs. Culture shapes everything that we do: our personalities, our behaviors, our perceptions, our engagements with other people. And so, when we go to study culture, we always want to do that from an experiential thinking, and I'll explain that in just a minute. So, this collective acknowledgement of social members is just that. It's that to live in a culture, we've got to have a set rules, or we could say ethics, of how we're going to engage each other. As human beings, we are social creatures. That is how we have evolved and survived for as long as we have on this planet. It's not because we've done everything our own ways by ourselves. It's because we've worked together with each other. And, we work together way longer than, once again, we'll just say the past 500 years, where we've had a lot of conflict with each other. We really don't see that much in the past. And I don't say that in a romanticized sense. I say that in a more kind of like a, sure, we still had a bunch of conflict and people fighting each other, but I don't know. It just seems like it just wasn't as bad. But maybe everybody in every generation always thinks that it seems to be they're living in the worst time, right? That's interesting to think about, and it's interesting to think about that idea and the context of how culture plays a role there. So that's where we get into this idea of experiential thinking. So basically, experiential thinking is it's experiencing what we are researching. So, it's learning as much as you can and then, trying to have some personal experiences with that. In the past, we'll just go with, far past, like the 1800s, when anthropology first came about. You know, Field work was a big part of that having that personal experience, going to Malaysia and visiting the Trobriand people on the Trobriand Islands and actually staying with them, not just like a weekend tourist trip, snap pictures, but actually living with them for months, even years. Some of these anthropologists in Trobriand Islands, I think Malinowski lived with them at one time for 7 years, maybe. So, I mean, he was really personally invested in studying this culture. And so I would say one of the great things about technology is that we can have a little personal experience of culture at the at the just the swipe of a button or something. And true, we may not physically be able to be in that other culture, but technology has really allowed us to connect with other people. So it's a lot easier to find somebody of a different culture and reach out to them and connect with them on a personal level to learn about their culture. And on that note, guys, it just occurred to me that when you do your research paper and your country presentation, maybe you might want to think about trying to find somebody that you can interview from your culture. And they don't have to live there. They used to be somebody who's moved here to America, kind of a little like that old school pen pal maybe type idea. But via social media or the internet, you could probably find somebody. Maybe you have family members that still, you want to look at your own culture and you have family members. So if you want to do like a little type of interview to get some personal accounts in your research, I'm okay with you doing that. Just make sure to balance that out with those academic facts too. I know that sounds silly because it's like, well, if it's somebody who's personally living in that culture, why do I need to have some academic person telling me about it? And that's just one of those little things because we are in academia, so we got to make sure to balance those out. But that's a pretty cool idea, guys. So think about that one. Um, and so this idea of experiential learning and, truly in emerging and engaging ourselves in the culture that we are studying is called participant observation. And as I've already mentioned, the first person to come up with that is anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski, and he studied the people in the Trobriand Islands. Here in America, Franz Boas was kind of the first guy to do that. So it's like Malinowski started it, and then Boas came here to America and worked with a bunch of different Native American cultures. And then, the reason why this is, a good thing to know is because there have been a lot of those cultures, like I said, that they've kind of been damaged, destroyed, some completely obliterated. I'm sure there are cultures we don't even know about because we haven't discovered anything from them and they got wiped out, right? But these early anthropologists, their works and their field work and their journal articles and stuff, they're valuable to us today because they help us to understand these cultures that we can't quite get to today, or we can't quite understand because of globalization, or those types of Western influence. And I would say even with people like me who have a very strong European background, that some of our original culture has kind of been lost through history and time. And so it's from these early researchers that we are able to connect with those ancestors from the past. And that's an important concept too, because you know, even if a culture is still not here, it's still important that we know something about them because in some way or another, all the ancestors, sorry, I thought I accidentally stopped my recording. All our they're all our ancestors. We all came from the people who came before us in some way, and it's somehow what they experienced is in our DNA. We hold it in our genes too. So that's just another reason why it's important that we try to always approach everybody and everything in life from this place of compassion, respect, and understanding. So that leads us to these ideas of ethnocentrism, holism, and pluralism. So basically, ethnocentrism is what I kind of loosely defined earlier about how you're wrong, kick your dog, burn your house down. That's ethnocentrism. That's saying that, my culture is so superior and so much better that, I have the right to come in and take all your stuff and say those kind of things to you because I'm superior. We can get into the Grecian ideology there, and a lot of that comes down to an idea of a divine creator. Even though the Greeks, they had multiple gods, they still had this idea that some people were by the divine right less or less human subhumans, and some humans were just superior. That's just the way that we were designed. And then of course we have different examples of ethnocentrism and racism throughout history. Of course, the Holocaust would be a big one. Genocide, all of those are examples of ethnocentrism. So we want to take that more holistic, pluralistic approach. And so basically, what that means is that with holism, we're looking at all of it. So, we're taking each little part of the puzzle and we're sticking that together to get that larger picture of the culture. So, sometimes we could stay at the surface level and we can stay locked in fallacies and false thinking because we're only looking at one thing. We only have one source of information. It's kind of like tunnel vision, right? And that's not the best way to find truth and get your facts. It's always good to have a plethora of sources so that you have these different views and these different interpretations so that you can decide for yourself what is truth, right? And so it's really no different when we're looking at culture and we're looking at groups of people, And once again, you got to take that compassionate, understanding, respectful stance and ask yourself, as if you're going to really go outside the box and study a culture that's totally different from yours, you want to do that in an unbiased, unjudgmental way because, as you're looking at your culture and the things that you're thinking, the questions that you're coming up about that culture, maybe even if you have somebody to interview, the questions you want to ask them, you know, take that moment to turn that around on yourself and be like, well, how do I feel if someone were to, say these things to me or ask me about this, or, how would I react in this situation? And, be like, you'd want someone to listen to you. You'd want him to have respect for what you're saying. You wouldn't want him to be interrupting you and telling you you're wrong. Right, guys? And so, you want to give that respect back to others. Okay. And so that's what pluralism is about. It's about that respect and about, approaching your host culture. When we study a culture different from ours, we refer to them as the host culture. You want to do that by, being objective, looking at the whole picture, and giving that respect, because that's where we build those bonds of trust with each other. And when we can build those bonds of trust, that's when we get those true positive changes that are beneficial for everybody. But of course, you guys know life is not all unicorns and rainbows, and we can't always please everybody. But we can do the best that we can in our own lives and be that example of positive social change for other, or that agent of positive social change in our own lives, because somehow or another the butterfly effect, right, it does affect other parts of the world, but for the most part it affects us and our immediate worlds that we live in. And that's a good thing. And just something as simple as smiling at the gas station attendant, being nice to the fast food workers, or people in restaurants. If COVID allows you to go out and eat, for us most of it is like carry out and stuff, but it's like being nice to people, just those types of people, because they're people just like us, and we all deserve respect and people being nice to us, right? You want it, so why not give it to others? And when we do give it to others, we find that we get more of that reflected back to us. So all right, guys. So, like I said, a little bit, but probably a lot of anthropology now is in past tense when we're looking at cultures. But at the same time, because of globalization, there was this resurgence to study present culture, so that we don't lose those cultures. A big example would be like down in the Amazon, where these private companies are coming in and they're buying up these parts of the Amazon jungle and flooding parts of the Amazon jungle. And there are cultures that live there that we can't even communicate with, basically, because they I don't know. I don't really know what to say. I don't think that they're any less smart than us. It's just they have a different way of living. And so, a lot of them aren't very approachable. They will kill you on sight. And I would say that's probably no different than anybody else. I mean, nobody wants some weirdo just showing up in their home and, like I said, start to try to tell them what to do. According to their culture, it's okay to react violently there. And, no judgment. My point is that, there, as much as the world has become globalized, there are still cultures that are very much intact in their indigenous belief system. Indigenous as in, native original ideas, not to, belittle those cultures. 'Cause like I said, I don't do that at all. I love all cultures, and it's fascinating. Do I want to go to the Amazon and try to work with any of those cultures? Not really, but still cool to learn about them. And I do believe that we all have that right to the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and all that good stuff, right, guys? So it is what it is, I guess. So, all right, my point there is that, we still have these, we do still have indigenous cultures that are fighting to keep their indigenous ways. There's a big conflict, too, with what's called like tourism or cultural tourism. They say that it's kind of disrespectful, that there are these indigenous cultures that are preserving their way of life by appealing to the tourist industry. So, they're sharing their cultures, sharing their sacred rituals and things of that nature with tourists, because they've got to survive, they've got to make money. And so, people take this outsider perspective and it's like, well, I think that that's wrong. And it's like, you know what? If that's how those people want to preserve and stay true to their cultural roots, who are you to tell them that they're wrong because globalization is forcing them to have to adapt, right? Think about that for a minute. It's okay to have globalization and to have these ideas, and I guess some of these luxury products that we have that help us, things like technology. If it wasn't for the internet and things like cell phones, that's really helpful to people in like parts of Africa, especially women, poor women around the world, having just a cell phone to where they can somehow make their own money. They can have a banking account. That probably here in America, that seems kind of like blasé. We're like, oh, anybody can do that. But there are parts of the world where these women, they need that to survive, in these parts of the world where women are still very much belittled, where, they're raped on a daily basis. And so, by just having a cell phone, they are able to get money and get themselves out of those types of situations. They're able to be more active in helping change those situations for the other women living there. So, like I said, you'll hear me get down a lot on globalization, but at the same time, I realize that, people around the world don't all live the way that we live. And I just, maybe they shouldn't, but there's, goes back to ecotourism. It's this kind of a cultural tourism, excuse me. It's this kind of a adaptation, as the world becomes more globalized. Does that mean that we become monoculture, that everybody does everybody the same way? Or does that mean as humans that we adapt and we take our individual cultures and we find a way to fit that in the larger culture of globalization? You see, instead of, globalization coming in and smothering you and changing you, we have evolved and adapted to a point that we can figure out a way to make it all work. I hope that makes sense. So, just last little bit here. We just have a couple more slides, guys. Want to talk just briefly on archaeology. You guys have probably already read all of this. So, basically, archaeology is just studying culture in the past. And a good way to define that is that archaeology looks at prehistoric or ancient cultural texts, right? What do we call those cultural texts in the prehistoric sense? Artifacts. So we know artifacts, we have those tools, we have the pottery, and then we have these things called ecofacts. Those are things like burials. Those are, we could see these structural remains of housings that you see there. I can't remember who gave me that picture. I'm not on that dig, but those are friends of mine. I just can't remember if that was Cindy or Kevin. I think it was Kevin who gave me that. So this is a place in Alabama. Yeah, that's Kevin. So this is a place in Alabama, and so you see that kind of squarish hole there in the ground. That is what we call a feature. That is a cultural eco fact. So we dig those units out like that because that's obviously some kind of structure. So, looks to me like it's probably some kind of living structure there, as in a house. I'm trying to be academic and professional. A living structure. It's just a house, guys. Outline of an ancient house there. And the cool thing about technology is that, in the past, we could just only kind of map that out one dimensionally, right? And put it on a piece of paper. But because of technology, we can we can take that drawing and make it three-dimensional, and make it three-dimensional to the point that we can actually get this visual representation of what that structure actually looked like. We can do that with mummies too, and there's some kind of mask, like in the past some cultures actually made masks of people. That was something in Europe, they would actually do death masks. But even Egypt, down in South America, Asian cultures, we kind of all would, have. My point is that we have um, some eco facts that are prehistoric human beings, and they have figured out how they can take technology and map out their faces so that you can, in 3D see what that person looks like. I think Cleopatra, they did that with her, and quite interesting time. So the reason that I bring up archaeology isn't just because I have a background in it, but because it's about going back to those roots, like I kind of talk about with the, when I say indigenous cultures, it's looking at the origins of culture so that we have a better understanding of social evolution, with which in turn gives us a better understanding of what it means to be human. And we'll real quickly, I don't know if I mentioned it in the other video, but if you guys want to do your research on a prehistoric or ancient culture, I'm okay with that. Just shoot me an email first, so that we can make sure that you have one, that you have enough evidence that you can actually have a good research paper on it. But I'm totally cool with you guys wanting to do prehistoric cultures too. That's always kind of cool. I'd actually kind of encourage that. All right. So, as I said, so, all of this is just about developing that compassion, respect, and understanding for our cultural diversity, for our individual diversity, and, for ourselves. And so, we want to be holistic, we want to be pluralistic, we want to refrain from ethnocentrism. We want to, be more experiential with our research and our thinking, as opposed to inferential. And, inferential is just what it means. It means you're inferring, means you kind of have a vague idea about something, and so you take that as a fact, and then, that's a fact, so now it's a truth. And it's very fallacious thinking. It's very ethnocentric type thinking. And so, we want to stay away from that. We always, don't want to infer or assume anything. You know how that saying about assume goes, and it's very appropriate saying. So, in conclusion, when it comes to learning about and studying culture, even if we're studying our own culture from that, if we're taking the emic perspective and we're looking around at what it is we do as a culture, it's a contemplative process. It involves listening and hearing, and, listening and hearing are kind of different things. Yes, they both involve our ears, but, sometimes, but we want to listen in a way that we really are listening. We are really are hearing. We're getting that deeper meaning. We're listening from our hearts and not just from our heads, where it's like, once again, ego. We're like, oh yeah, I heard what you said, so I know exactly what you're going to say next. I'm going to tell you exactly how it's going to be, and we're not really going to have a conversation because I'm just going to talk and say what I want, and then you're just going to talk and say what you want, and nobody is hearing or listening to what the other person said. And, that's where a lot of conflict comes in because we don't give ourselves and others that space to truly try to, understand what is being said to us. Because, when we take that time and space to truly listen, then we get that contemplation. That's when we create that space so that we can marinate on it, right? We marinate on what's being said so that we develop more of that understanding and compassion. And then that leads us to the integration part, and that's just we find a way to take that information that we have just listened to, we have thought and mulled over in our heads, and we integrate it in our lives so that we are empowered to move forward in those positive and productive ways for ourselves and for others. Oop, oop, hold on, sorry guys. All right, so basically, we can end. This is what I just said. So, all right, guys, so that ends our lecture for this week. If you need anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always here for you guys. Lastly, I just want to point out my reference slide for you. As you guys noticed throughout this presentation, I had in-text citations. Easiest, simplest way to do that, guys, is that last name and date. And, if you scroll through, you can note, or if you look through class, look at the stuff I've posted, kind of note how I've done that. It's the easiest way to do it. Easiest way to not get dinged for APA. And then because we've had some updates with the seventh edition, I just want point a couple of things out here. You see that I have all my different sources listed here, and in the past, and okay, let me start here first. Let me back up. APA follows a formula. No matter what kind of source you have, it's always going to follow the same formula. It's who wrote it, when did they write it, what is it, what's the name of it, and where did you get it. That's kind of where we start seeing deviations in the formula that make us think that because we have a website here and we have a textbook here, we have to somehow cite those in different ways, and we don't. It's always going to follow that basic formula, and it's up to us to be the detective to figure out what those elements are that comprise that formula. That's a really complicated way of saying that, like if you have a journal, or see, I just have actual books listed here, but let's say one of these was a journal article. Then when I get to where did you get it from, that information isn't just going to be the publisher like I have listed here. Note that, guys, in the past, before the seventh edition updates, we used to put the city and the state before the publisher's name. We've eliminated that, and we just put the publisher's name after the title of the work. So now if let's say that Diker there, I spelled that wrong. It should be Duiker. Diker was actually a journal article. That where did you get it from part of the formula is going to change because you have to include the journal article now. You have to be specific about what that issue is, what the volume is, and then there's a little ticky way of how you have to actually do your font, and you got to italicize parts of it and parts of it you don't italicize. And then if you get it online, it's you just want to use that URL link. So let's say that at Diker I just went straight to a Cengage website, and I pulled up a copy of that. Then instead of having Cengage Learning there, I would have whatever that URL is. So it would be, the HTTP, blah, 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 whatever you copy and paste it in. And so just little points there on APA. I'm actually more than happy to help you guys with that too. If you need anything set up, just reach out to me, guys. Like I said, if you need anything with class, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I think that we're going to have a great class and a good time learning about culture and hopefully learn something about ourselves. So, all right, guys, thanks.